Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Idea Talks, a Unite podcast focusing on topics related to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Here we discuss how we can create better work and study environments for everyone at our universities. I am Inesa, Associate Professor at the Department of Applied Foreign Languages of Grenoble Alpes University, France, and
I'm Hanna Hakala. I'm a lecturer, project manager at Aalto University, and a doctoral researcher at the University of Helsinki, Finland.
And we will be hosting this episode where we will discuss belonging and community in Unite with our guest speaker, Danielle Taylor, Associate Professor of Management at the University of Paris I, Panthéon-Sorbonne, and recipient of the Grenoble Alpes University Best PhD Thesis Award in 2023. Her involvement in Unite started because Unite was a field for her PhD research on managing language diversity in global virtual teams. Today, she has joined us to talk about belonging in Unite and share some of her ongoing research results on this topic with us. So let's start with understanding the concept of belonging, shall we?
So, Danielle, could you define what belonging means to you?
Yes, absolutely. I first want to just say thank you for inviting me here today. So belonging in a very general sense is about feeling a part, really an integral part of your environment. And that is done by being yourself and developing relationships with people. Now, I come from a background in management, and I work specifically on organizational or work belonging. And that is all about what makes work feel meaningful. It's about being able to be yourself and be acknowledged for who you are, your talents, your interests, your experiences, and what you bring to the table. So it's about being valued at work.
Wow, sounds really, really important. What is one thing you wish that everyone understood about the importance of sense of belonging in building a strong community?
So I think I first want to give some idea of the context for belonging. A sense of belonging is individual. It's our individual perception, and the degree of belonging can differ from person to person. But that being said, your environment has a really big influence on your belonging to a group. So at work, we can see that the relationships that we develop with people, the work structures, the decision-making process, all influences your development of belonging. So it's something that we should look at as a whole for the individual, but also for the group and for the organization as a whole.
Wow. Fascinating. So now that we have defined the concept of belonging a bit, maybe we could move on to the motivation and value of your current research on this topic, as our audience might wonder what exactly motivated you to research belonging and community within Unite.
That's a good question. So I actually started working with Unite in 2020 when I was doing my PhD at University Grenoble Alpes. I worked a lot with a group called the M&Ms. They're an expert team on multiculturalism and multilingualism. And at the time, I was getting involved in this massive project, participating a lot online because it was during the pandemic and because people were spread out across Europe. And I was starting to build my own sense of belonging to the M&Ms and to Unite. Now, of course, I was doing research, interviewing people at different levels and in different groups in Unite. I was able to get involved and go to my first Unite dialogue at UPC in Barcelona. And during this time, I kept hearing the same information, that belonging varied from group to group, that it was much stronger at lower group levels, such as expert teams, compared to Unite as a whole. And really overall that people were struggling to relate to Unite as a whole. So I felt motivated to understand this a bit further and maybe work on developing that sense of belonging to Unite.
So, exactly, why is a sense of belonging and community important in an alliance like Unite? And how does fostering these dimensions benefit the members of Unite?
So, Unite, like all European university alliances, is still a rather new type of organization. So, in management, we would call it a meta organization. So, that's simply an organization that is made up of other organizations, in this case, the partner universities. And to be fair, a lot is still being figured out. But one thing that I saw early on is that the ones that didn't feel this connection to Unite didn't stay, or they didn't stay as long as those who did. And I really believe that working on belonging and community in Unite is going to provide a more secure future for the Alliance. So teachers, researchers, staff, and students that are the backbone of the Alliance they're working on implementing Unite projects. When they feel the sense of belonging, they're more motivated and more engaged because they're able to contribute in a meaningful way.
Wow, interesting. Thank you, Danielle. So, in your experience, what is the most rewarding part of seeing a community come together around a shared sense of belonging?
I think that seeing people that are motivated, that are engaged because they feel belonging is probably the most rewarding part. This makes me think of a study from Cecilia Hebert from 2022. She studied over 11,800 global participants, and she showed that sense of belonging was the number one driver of employee engagement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Hey, so now that we know something about the motivation for and also the added value of your research, could you tell us more about the way in which you conducted this research on belonging in Unite?
Absolutely. First of all, this project is a team effort. I'm working with colleagues from Université Grenoble Alpes, Anne Bartel-Radic and Madeleine Zalkind, a colleague from the University of Quebec at Montreal, Martin Cloutier, and one more from the Ohio State University, Fabienne Munch. Also, Fabienne worked in Unite as a research engineer for a year, so she's quite familiar with this context as well. But to research belonging in Unite, we really wanted to find a research approach that was involving everyone within Unite. And that's why we invited Martin Cloutier to join this project, because he's a specialist in a research method called group concept mapping.
Okay.
And group concept mapping is this rigorous scientific method, but it's involving people. It's involving Unite participants through different steps, such as brainstorming, individual sessions where participants engage with the ideas by identifying themes, by showing what's important to them personally, and finally coming back to the group and having workshops and discussions around these ideas. So we liked this idea of really involving everyone in this research.
Sounds very interesting and very like a comprehensive method. Based on your research, what key factors contribute to building and nurturing a sense of belonging? And what does the Uniters' lived experience of these dimensions look like?
So I have to say we have a lot of really interesting results coming out of this project, and we're still working through some of them. But one thing I could tell you is about the concept map that our research is creating. What I mean by that is we have 8 themes that are central to Uniter's sense of belonging. And at the core of all of that is personal and professional development. So people want to see the benefit of their work in Unite on their personal and professional skills that they could use later. Of course, there's lots of other themes, and we can see them kind of on different axes. So on one hand, we see some structural elements, such as work structures, defined roles, recognition of each person's contribution. On the other hand, there's those collective elements, such as inclusion and interpersonal relationships that are really highlighted. And lastly, I do want to mention that this is at all levels in Unite. So we see that, at a collective level, organizational level, people need to understand and agree with the overall alliance vision and goals. But they also need to be helped by their communities and expert teams. So here we can see the importance of team building and team communication.
Absolutely. Wow, that's super fascinating. In the Unite Dialogue on Darmstadt in September 2024, you led an exciting workshop on belonging, community, and trust. What were some of the key insights that emerged, and why do you think they are important?
Yeah, so this workshop was a great opportunity to come back to the community of Unite and really pick their brains, get some ideas from them. So, you mentioned this workshop. We had 26 participants from different universities and communities and expert teams, where we were really able to look in depth at the different themes coming from our research. It's hard to choose just one thing. But let me give you an example maybe. So there was one theme, for example, talking about recognizing each person's contributions in Unite. And we can see that in our results, this is really important for each person, but they feel it's a bit less present within Unite than it should be. So at the workshop, we discussed how people participating in Unite want to see that their efforts and contributions have a visible impact. And this could be done through different ideas. Participants were sharing many great ideas, such as creating common standards or a framework of recognition, compensating the work being done in a standard way, etc. But maybe the last thing to add here is that in this workshop, people were saying that they're quite pleased by the personal connections, the human connections within Unite. And I think that's really something that should not be overlooked. So, we have tools and organizational structures that are important, but we shouldn't forget the human aspect.
Yes, couldn't agree more.
Very interesting. So based on your research, Danielle, what are some of the biggest challenges or barriers that could hinder the development of a sense of belonging among Uniters? And what strategies can help overcome them?
Yeah, so I think it's, as I have been talking a little bit about, addressing belonging at different levels in Unite. So in our workshop, we had a lot of ideas and discussion about tools and organizational structures. So maybe that's something that Unite, the organizational level of Unite, could look at, making sure that everyone has the same opportunities for recognition, the same access to the same information, even the opportunity to participate in face-to-face events such as the dialogues. But also looking at communities and expert teams, the importance of relationships shouldn't be overlooked. So it's important to get to know each other, to understand each other's backgrounds, contexts, expertise as well. And we see how important working in an international environment is. This could be further highlighted. The group leader and group members could continue sharing their diversity and being sure that inclusion is highlighted, that shared values throughout the group are highlighted in this regard too.
Mm-hmm. As you brought up, time allocation, personal availability, and recognition of the work done came up often in the workshop you organized in Darmstadt as major challenges in building belonging, community, and trust within Unite. What practical steps do you think Uniters can take to address these challenges?
Mm-hmm. So this is a tough one. And that's really because time allocation and personal availability differs so much from one person to the next. So it's only natural that those that seem to be giving more time and effort tend to feel a stronger sense of belonging. But we can still create belonging for everyone, no matter their level of participation. So just taking the time to get to know each other, making an effort to be open, to contribute as much as possible, to show your true self. So we saw, of course, that inclusion is extremely important. So the working group and really all of Unite should be focusing on creating an inclusive atmosphere where each participant feels welcome just to be themselves.
Inclusion is indeed important in building belonging, as you brought up. Another thing that came up in the Darmstadt workshop was team building activities. As a way to improve Uniters' sense of belonging, which best practices for team building would you recommend?
So here I'm actually going to refer to a Forbes article from 2023 by the Forbes Coaches Council, because I think it does a really good job at outlining the key steps that leaders can take to ensure the success of team building activities. I'm just going to maybe highlight 5 steps that I think are really important, especially within the context of Unite. So first, it's important that team building should not be a one-off activity. So team building should be an ongoing process where team cohesion and belonging is constantly developing. Second, team building should take place in a safe environment. Everyone should feel free to express themselves without fear of negative consequences. Third is communication. Creating spaces where team members can communicate, share input, listen to each other's voices with attitudes of openness, acceptance, and inclusion. We need to have that space where we can communicate. Fourth, and in turn, this creates a space where people get to know each other as individuals. So we'll be building those personal relationships. And finally, I just want to remind that there's a context for team building. So we have a team with a purpose, a value, a mission, and all of that should be reinforced through the activity of team building.
Wow, that was a lot to digest. Thank you so much. Well, it has been truly exciting to discuss these topics and hear about your research on belonging in Unite. We have certainly gained many new insights into these topics, and we hope that so have our listeners. Now, looking forward, what do you think the future holds for Unite as a community if we manage to build a strong sense of belonging?
I think that Unite has a very promising future. Unite has already achieved a lot in terms of creating an alliance among 9 European universities. That's a really great accomplishment. And with further developing a sense of belonging, I think that the opportunities available to the alliance will only grow. And that is in terms of the alliance overall, but in terms of everyone participating within Unite, whether that's students, staff, teachers, or researchers.
Yes, yes. Finally, for those listening who may want to learn more about these topics, are there any resources that you would recommend?
Yeah, there's a lot of good resources out there about belonging in the work context. I could maybe refer you to articles in Forbes and Harvard Business Review, for example, such as A Culture of Belonging Creates a Team That Thrives by Dee Henley, The Value of Belonging at Work by Evan Carr and colleagues. Going beyond that, for those of you that are more inclined to read about team processes, including belonging, cohesion, and trust, specifically in linguistically diverse global teams, my thesis can be found open access online. And I'd also like to recommend resources such as Elite the Serious Game, which I also developed during my PhD, which focuses on improving communication, which, as we've seen, is a building block of belonging.
Wow. Thanks for all those useful resources. On behalf of the whole Unite community, Hanna, Liisa and I would like to thank you very much for your willingness to be interviewed and have this stimulating discussion with us. So thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing your research results with us on belonging. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you in the studio with us today.
Thank you.
And a big thank you to our listeners as well. We are so happy that you want to learn more about inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. The next episode of Idea Talks will focus on harassment. So stay tuned. And until next time, please consider what good ideas you got from this discussion. Together, we can make a change.
Thank you.